I am a wicked woman. At the age of 12, my maternal grandfather's family was executed for corruption and bribery. My father despised me and wanted to kill me. I tore off my clothes overnight and slept with the stableman to save my life. But I still lost my innocence and was sent to a lonely mountain dozens of miles away from the capital. Everyone thought I would die of depression or spend my life repenting in a temple, but I did not. I had the ambition and flaws of my maternal grandfather's lineage, single-mindedly determined to climb higher. During the day, I devoutly worshipped the Buddha, while at night I nearly ruined my eyes reading erotic pictures, and in my spare time, I soaked my body in goat's milk. Finally, at the age of 16, an opportunity came. The crown prince brought my half-sister to offer incense and pray for blessings. Amidst the swirling smoke, the crown prince glanced at me indifferently, late at night. He pushed open my door. I never knew a little fox was hiding in these deep mountains. The crown prince arrived very late, after my half-sister Shimingzhu had already finished humiliating me and returned to the neighboring room to sleep. He pushed the door open boldly and looked down at me from above. He had grown much taller, no longer as frail as he was when I saw him as a child. Under the dim candlelight, his gaze was filled with wariness and coldness. I clenched my fists tightly. Having planned for 5 years, and today was my first attempt, there's a difference between imagining and actually carrying out something seductive. I lowered my head and walked toward him step by step, my eyes filled with endless tenderness. Just 2 steps away, I stopped and called out to him in a trembling voice, "Your Highness, it's been a long time." The wariness on Li Ke's face faded away. He had finally recognized me. 5 years ago, we used to attend school together, and in the capital. There were busybodies who spread rumors that we were a perfect match, with the man talented and the woman beautiful. But later, my grandfather's corruption case shocked the entire court, and the whole family was executed at the Meridian Gate. I once tried to send a letter to the Crown Prince for help, but I couldn't even get through the main gate. At this moment, he looked at me with a cold expression. "What, even now, Miss Shaw, you still refuse to accept it? Or perhaps you want to plead with me, saying your maternal grandfather was wronged?" He took half a step back, as if afraid of being tainted by filth. "You went to great lengths to lure me here. What do you want?" I wondered how a nun in a remote mountain temple could have such beauty. "So it turns out you wanted to escape." Li Ke was right. I really wanted to escape. Having been here for 5 years, not only did I have to do countless heavy chores every day, but as I grew older, the other nuns in the temple also looked at me with impure eyes. I had been pampered and cherished since childhood, so naturally, I wanted to break free from this cage. But Li Ke was not convinced. He closed his eyes as if in disgust, looking as though he was about to leave. "I've waited so long, and now that I finally have this opportunity, how could I possibly give it up easily?" I decided to throw caution to the wind, rushing to his feet and rubbing my soft, fragrant body against his thigh. Looking up again, my eyes were filled with tears. "Your Highness has misunderstood. How could Yun Yang ever do such a thing? Yun Yang simply hasn't seen a familiar face in a long time." Upon seeing your Highness's dignified and imposing presence, I couldn't help but be overcome with emotion. During our few meetings in childhood, compared to the other princes, your Highness stood out with your exceptional demeanor and mastery of both literary and martial arts. Yun Yang has long admired you, but I never dared to speak of it. Today, I thought, in this desolate place, where I might die any day, I should at least let your Highness know of these feelings. I slowly raised my head, tears trickling down in the dim candlelight, paired with the specially made transparent outer gauze. It made Li Ke's breathing grow noticeably heavier. He appears dignified and righteous, but in reality, he has all the flaws that men possess. What he just said was merely testing my limits. Li Ke grew up in the imperial palace, Having witnessed countless tactics women used to vie for favor, as well as encountering beauties of all kinds, however, this was the first time he had ever met a beautiful nun. I bet that Li Ke's lust outweighs his reason. Sure enough, Li Ke's eyes darkened a few shades. His expression seemed somewhat dazed. Seizing the opportunity, I crawled forward and grabbed the hem of his robe. Your Highness, I fear that in this lifetime, Yun Yang can only be buried here. I beg you to take pity on me and grant me one memory. Will you? Li Ke lowered his head, and the magnificent scene I had already squeezed into view was effortlessly taken in by him. After only a moment of hesitation, he crouched down and pulled me into his embrace. Yun Yang, since you are so earnest, I will agree to you this once. Later, keep your voice down. Li Ke held me and laid me on the prepared bed. In the flickering candlelight, he seemed to have gained the whole world. However, Li Ke took after his mother and was a pretentious fool. He acted tough on the surface but was actually too afraid to take any risks. He probably sensed my ill intentions. We did everything and nothing all night. As dawn approached, he held me in his arms, looking thoroughly satisfied. Yun Yang, my position as crown prince is not yet secure, so I cannot rescue you from here, rest assured. You have served me very well today, and I will remember it. If I ascend the throne in the future, I will make you a consort at the first opportunity. Stay here and wait for me patiently. Tears welled up in my eyes, like a pitiful and helpless kitten. Only Li Ke remains as my sole reliance. Your Highness, Yun Yang asks for nothing, only that you do not forget me. I leaned down to kiss him, using the techniques I learned from the Spring Palace paintings. I teased him until his breathing grew heavier. The next day when I was leaving, Li Ke gave me a jade pendant. The She family's case has been settled, and there's nothing more I can do, but this jade pendant can keep you safe. Yun Yang, wait for me to return. I successfully climbed into Li Ke's bed, but it also seems like I didn't. He left resolutely, without even glancing at me. After waiting for 5 years, enduring for 5 years, I finally have a chance to escape this hardship. And I won't give it up. Once Li Ke leaves, I'll have to start washing clothes, cooking, and chopping firewood again. The water in winter is so cold it feels like it's tearing the flesh from your hands. As I wash the clothes, tears stream down my face. This damn life is just too hard to bear. Unlike other fallen noble daughters, my maternal grandfather's family was indeed guilty of corruption and bribery. Not only that, but from childhood, we, the children and grandchildren, lived in extreme luxury, especially my mother. Since marrying into the She family, she never once regarded her husband, a vice minister of rights, with any respect. Whenever anyone displeased her, from the elderly lady of the house down to the servants and maids, she would seek revenge, so much so that when her maternal family encountered trouble, she sobered up with astonishing speed, standing on the third-floor pavilion. Holding the letter from her grandfather that said flee quickly, she thought it over again and again, then tore off her skirt sash. She gripped my shoulders and said, Yuna, mother has wronged you. Your maternal grandfather is in trouble, and your father's family will certainly not let me off. Mother wants to take you away, but I can't bring myself to do it. If your father is kind-hearted and spares you, then strive to live on. If not, mother will go first and prepare a home for you. I was barely 12 years old, watching as she resolutely stepped onto the footrest. Her hands clawed wildly, but in the end, she didn't struggle much. When she died, she wore a gilded soft hairpin, an 8-treasure gold necklace, and her hands were painted with coal-red nail polish. Her eyes did not close, staring fixedly at me, as if to let me live on. My mind went blank. Having relied on my mother's power to act lawlessly for 12 years, I hadn't yet adapted to falling from the clouds. Father arrived, bringing Lan, the concubine who was She Mingzhu's mother, and holding a sword in his hand. Seeing my mother hanging from the beam, he spat, "That damned whore, She beat me to it. His eyes were filled with disdain, with not a trace of reluctance for the person who once shared his pillow. My mother must have been truly unpopular, even after her death. During the funeral, the servants secretly pinched her a few times. In truth, I was also supposed to die soon. But my father cared about his reputation and didn't want to be seen as someone who kicks others when they're down, so he pretended to give my mother a decent funeral and invited some of his close colleagues. I heard with my own ears him say that once things were settled, he would bury me together with my mother in her coffin. To the outside world, they would say I died of illness. How could I accept this? Taking advantage of my father's colleague being drunk and going to the backyard to look at calligraphy, I drugged a groom, took off my own clothes, and lay on top of him. I want to make my father lose face in a big, big way, to make the matter impossible to cover up, so that everyone in the entire capital will pay attention to whether I live or die. Sure enough, those colleagues were first shocked, and then their teasing expressions couldn't be suppressed. My father was so angry that his hair stood on end. Ungrateful daughter, you're only 12 years old, what are you doing? I covered my face and cried, my heart breaking into pieces. They said that Aunt Lan brought me a bowl of tea, and after I drank it, I became dazed and unaware of what happened. My father certainly couldn't go to verify the truth, yet he had to silence the endless gossip. He endured it again and again. Then sent someone to cut off my hair overnight and sent me to the Bright Moon Nunnery, and this joke took a full 5 years to fade away. I knew that once the people in the capital had completely forgotten this joke, my death would not be far off. My grandfather died, my mother died, and I was still so young I couldn't die too. No matter the cost, I had to break free from this dead end. The nobles in the capital would never come to this godforsaken place, but my newly legitimized half-sister, who has been overshadowed by me for 12 years, is determined to crush me. She is about to climb the high branch of the crown prince and will surely come to flaunt it. Before heading back, she slapped me dozens of times, grabbed my collar, and looked at me with disdain. Sister, my dear sister, you are truly remarkable, you still haven't died. If I were you. Having fallen from the esteemed daughter of an official to being seen naked by a groom and then sent by father to become a nun in the mountains, with my reputation and dignity utterly ruined, I would have slit my throat. But you, on the other hand, drag out your existence day by day, licking my shoes and emptying my chamber pot for a few pieces of meat. You're really quite frightening. I'm about to become the crown princess, so I'm afraid I won't have much time to visit you in the future. That Abbess Jingxian is deeply devoted to you. Perhaps she'd like to keep you company. If you truly don't want to die, why don't I take it upon myself to arrange your marriage to her? At least you'll get a taste of something new. Ha 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 ha. She laughed wildly, completely unaware of the glaring red mark beneath the crown prince's collar not far away. I clenched my fists tightly, enduring the humiliation as I had grown accustomed to doing. No rush, Shimingzhu, no rush. Life has its ups and downs. We'll just have to wait and see. In the days that followed, Li Ku came 2 or 3 times a month. I used every trick in the book to keep him coming back for more. No matter how much I tried to act cute, he refused to take me away from this temple. Not only that, but he also sent secret guards to watch me, making me copy the scriptures an extra 100 times every day. He said I was impure in mind and body, defiling the Buddhist sanctuary, and that I would easily face retribution. I sneered inwardly. When you took off my clothes, you didn't seem afraid of any retribution. Men are probably all like this, selfish and cold-hearted. But with his protection, my days in the temple became much easier, until a few months later, when the emperor arranged a marriage between the crown prince and Shimingzhu. Li Ku came to find me, saying that we might not be able to meet as often in the future. I didn't make a fuss or cause a scene, just leaned against the bed and silently shed tears. Your Highness, Being able to steal these days was Yunyang's good fortune. Now that your highness has found a new love, just forget about Yunyang. Li Ku sighed softly, clearly showing that he truly liked me. He gently touched my cheek, his eyes filled with helplessness. Yunyang, you know my current situation doesn't allow me to make mistakes, and many things are beyond my control. I knelt down devoutly, leaning against his temple like a gentle kitten. No, your highness. Please don't say that, it pains Yunyang's heart. Yunyang will pray for you every day from now on, wishing your highness to ascend to a high position and achieve all your desires. I only hope that when the time comes, you won't forget that Yunyang is still suffering here. My tears fell onto the open hem of his robe, and Li Ku's breath caught for a moment. But there are no true romantics in the royal family. Once he left this room, he immediately put me out of his mind. Li Ku and Shi Mingzhu got married, and soon their loving reputation spread throughout the capital. Jingxian received the news and knocked on my door triumphantly. Jingyi, you should give up now. I told you long ago that men are unreliable. Her eyes swept over my body, a cold sneer curling at her lips. You've been touched by the crown prince, haven't you? So what? He still abandoned you. Tonight, if you follow me, sister will let you taste a different kind of pleasure. With that, she tried to slip into my room. I pulled out a dagger and held it against my chest. Jingxian, don't do anything reckless. I belong to the crown prince. Even if he's forgotten me for now, he'll remember eventually. If he finds out we've been involved in any improper way, we'll be in serious trouble. I'm just seeking a place to settle down, and you're only after a moment of pleasure. Why don't you look at others? In this temple, there are plenty more vibrant than me. Jingxian smiled. There may be those more attractive than you, but few are as provocative as you. Don't think I don't know what you're after. Dreaming of using men to escape this place, what a fantasy. Even if I don't touch you now, one day you'll come crying and begging me. I'll be waiting. She turned and left with a flick of her sleeve. I entered the room, turned on the light, and pulled out The Art of War. I looked like I was reading, but my mind was in complete chaos. Li Ku was my only hope, and success or failure depended entirely on a gamble. But now it seems that heaven does not favor me, as if it intends to trap me here for a lifetime. How can this be? I am not willing to accept it. A moth flew in and threw itself onto the candle flame. At that moment, my heart eerily calmed down. I became anxious. I shouldn't have lost my composure. Since ancient times, gambling has had both wins and losses. I should stay calm and not let myself become flustered. From early autumn until the depths of winter, when the mountain streams had frozen over, there was still no news from the crown prince. I get up every day to wash vegetables and clothes, and whenever I have a little free time, I go to gather herbs to apply to my chest and private parts, and also search for wild goat milk to wash my body. At night, I practice the movements from the illustrated guide. Little by little, my figure and appearance are my weapons to escape this hell. And I cannot let them go to waste, afraid that Li Ku might forget me. I even had a secret guard deliver a handkerchief I had specially embroidered for him. Little did I know that this handkerchief would bring me great disaster. Li Ku didn't come, but Shi Mingzhu did. She kicked my door open, her eyes filled with hatred. Unlike before when she hid her actions, this time she brought countless maidservants, dragged me directly into the courtyard, stripped off my clothes, and pinned me to the ground. Then she looked down at me from above. "Ha, you're quite something, Shiyuna. Even after becoming a nun, you still won't give up and dare to seduce His Highness. If I hadn't accidentally seen him hiding your handkerchief, I wouldn't have known about the good deeds you've been up to. You wretch. Guards, beat her to death, then throw her into the mass grave." The Bright Moon Nunnery had received countless sums of money from Shi Mingzhu, and all these years, no matter how she bullied me, they turned a blind eye. Now, hearing that they wanted my life, the abbess merely chanted a mitabha. Good and evil will eventually be repaid. They have already given up on saving me. Watching her walk away bit by bit, a sense of despair finally began to grow in my heart. I lay on the ground, cold and ashamed, overwhelmed with grief and indignation, unable to hold back a sorrowful cry. "Mother, your daughter is coming to find you." The sound startled the flying crows, and there was a faint noise. No one noticed that Shi Mingzhu smiled triumphantly and gestured to the maid. "Kill her, scar her face, and then stab her down there. Since she's a worthless slut who can't control her body, let her meet her mother in this state. After all, that's how her mother died too." I was already so cold that my consciousness was beginning to blur, watching as the maid approached step by step with a leather whip soaked in salt water. Tears kept falling as I resigned myself to watching the whip about to strike. Just then, someone shouted, "Stop!" It was a masked man who arrived. He seemed to have just been passing by, heard my cry, and leaped into the courtyard. With just one glance, the arrogant Shi Mingzhu's arrogance diminished by several degrees. Coming to her senses, she felt angry again. "How dare you? Where did this reckless fool come from, daring to barge into a private residence?" the man snorted. "I didn't know that the national temple of the Great Jing Kingdom was your private residence. Which household are you from?" Although the Mingyu nunnery is located on a remote small hill, its origin is a temple built by the late emperor to pray for the Hui consort. However, after a larger temple was later constructed, this one gradually fell into decline. Strictly speaking, Shi Mingzhu was actually insulting the royal family. Therefore, Shi Mingzhu felt somewhat flustered. Fearing that her identity as the crown princess would be recognized, and she hurriedly left with her entourage. Only then did the man squat down, take off his clothes, and wrap them around me. After all that commotion, I had already developed a high fever and fainted. Opening my eyes again, I found myself lying in his arms. The man had already removed his face covering and said his name was Wang Du, a wandering swordsman who happened to pass by the temple and heard my desperate cries. So he came in to save me. He smiled and asked me what had happened. Looking at his face, which bore a striking resemblance to Li Ku's, and his age of around 40, I bit my lip hard to keep from screaming. Heaven has eyes. After all, giving me a way out, it actually allowed the current emperor to appear here. I don't know why he is here, but I do know that this is a better opportunity than Li Ku. After hesitating in my mind for several rounds, I still chose to play dumb. I mentioned that my maternal grandfather was a convicted official, framed by his own family, and now I must end my remaining days in this temple. When Wang Du entered, he must have seen me stripped completely naked. My expression was sorrowful, and tears kept falling from my eyes. "Mr. Wang, do you think a woman's fate is always this difficult? If I were a man, I could strive to restore the family's fortunes by studying diligently, pursuing an official career, or building wealth through business. There would always be a path forward. But I am a woman. Even if I just want to live a decent life, I can only rely on a man. Despite my past vows, after enduring such a great humiliation, I feel somewhat broken inside." Wang Du looked at me for a moment and said, "I see the young lady enjoys reading." "Yes, reading about other people's deeds barely keeps me going." "Then do you know the story of Gojian sleeping on brushwood and tasting gall?" "I know, and I once wanted to be like that too. In the end, my mental fortitude just isn't strong enough." The prince chuckled softly. "The ancients said, 'Toil the mind and labor the body, only then can one achieve great things.' But I don't see it that way. As the saying goes, first fate, second fortune, third feng shui. What a person can accomplish is essentially predetermined. Take the current crown prince, for example. He is average in talent, average in intellect, and average in physical ability. If he were born into an ordinary family, at best he might pass the counter-level imperial exam, and even becoming a provincial scholar would be a struggle. But he was born lucky, delivered from the queen's womb, surpassing countless talents, I wiped away my tears, feeling a bit like laughing. This person, looking down on his own son so much, why did he still appoint him as crown prince? I sighed. Yes, fate, it's all fate. When my maternal grandfather was alive, I was the apple of the family's eye, not to mention delicacies like abalone and shark fin. Even silk worth thousands of gold could be burned for my amusement. It's just that I was too young back then to fully appreciate such pleasures, and now that fortune is gone, it's truly infuriating. If I had known earlier, I would have preferred to endure hardship first and enjoy sweetness later. Seeing my frustration, the prince laughed heartily. He had just turned 40, with exceptionally striking features, and possessed a composure that came with age, which young men lacked. That laugh truly made my heart skip a few beats. He leaned down, reached into my blanket, brushed past my waist, and pulled out a copy of The Plum in the Golden Vase. He said, "If you wish, I can grant you this fortune again. Do you dare to take it?" Li Yi revealed his identity and said he would take me into the palace. At that moment, my back was drenched in sweat. There was some joy, but more than that, there was fear. Life in the wild mountains was bleak and harsh, but entering the palace was another kind of life and death struggle. Neither path was easy, but I had no choice. I couldn't waste my whole life in this dilapidated temple. A few days later, a small sedan chair carried me into the palace. I became noble Lady Yun of Yongning Palace. Li Yi had many children, and his harem was equally abundant, a garden of blooming flowers in all colors and varieties. But a bald nun like me was the first. Li Yi had always been very steady in the past, so much so that when he strayed from the norm just once, the entire court and government were thrown into chaos. Countless ministers submitted memorials, demanding the execution of me, the calamitous seductress who brought ruin to the country. Li Yi paid no heed. He was in the Jade Maiden Palace, fooling around with me. He said that on that day, when he kicked open the door, he saw my jade-like body lying prone on the ground. Just a glimpse of her back was enough to set his heart racing, making it hard for him to control his emotions. I have calmed down now and have a guess as to why Li Yi brought me back. Li Yi is not a foolish ruler. He expanded the territory of the Great Jing by thousands of miles, filled the national treasury, and brought prosperity and peace to the people. How could he possibly be foolish? I suppose, aside from being attracted to me, he also has someone he wants to deal with. The women in the harem are either the illegitimate daughters of this minister or the legitimate daughters of that chancellor, one after another, filled with schemes and interests. Only I, with a captivating appearance, have no one behind me. The only one I can rely on is Li Yi. The only one I can be loyal to is also Li Yi. He enjoys my complete submission, building for me an incredibly luxurious palace, exempting me from interactions with other concubines, so that I can serve him wholeheartedly. I remain composed. During the day when he attends court, I have the palace maids attend to me to maintain my health. When he is done with his duties, I wear meticulously designed garments and, under the starlight shining through the center of the palace, share intimate moments of love with him. The little thoughts I have. I never hide from him. He asked me if I hated him for killing my maternal grandfather. I said that my grandfather deserved to die for his corruption and bribery, which left tens of thousands of people displaced, so I did not hate him. He then asked me whether I liked him or Li Ku more. I said that Li Ku was a useless fool. How could he compare to the brave and heroic emperor? Li Yi smiled, propping his chin on his hand, and leaned over to kiss me. He said, "Yuna, do you know? I've never met a woman like you before, a nun, skilled in the art of the bedchamber, with eyes that show no regard for worldly opinions, only a desire for power and life. You seem not to care about your deceased family, nor about those who have hurt you in the past. Like a wild grass, you thrive in the mud, climbing upward by any means necessary. I really like your spirit. I, too, have walked a long path, taken many lives, and done many wrongs. I've gone to great lengths to ensure a good reputation for the centuries to come. Sometimes, after a day of scheming and strategizing with those officials in court, I return to the inner palace only to face the plots of a room full of women. It's exhausting. Until I met you, it felt like opening a treasure book. I never knew someone could live with such honesty and openness. Lee likes me and dotes on me with a purpose. He made me a living target in the harem, stirring up those who already had hidden intentions. 3 months later, he went to the Empress's palace, and I felt the danger in the palace for the first time. At that time, I was lying in the backyard, feigning sleep, when Li Ku barged in. He dismissed the palace maids and eunuchs, and upon seeing me, his face turned pale and then flushed. "Yun Niang, why must you stoop to such degradation?" My scalp tingled with fear, unsure how Li Ku could so brazenly enter the inner palace. Given our past history, if someone with ill intentions were to blow this out of proportion, both of us would be in deep trouble. Li Ku seemed completely unfazed, taking another step forward. "You've already been with me, and now you're with my father. Have all the books you've read gone to the dogs? A shameless woman like you deserves to be drowned in a pig cage or given poisoned wine. Tomorrow, I will petition my father to have you executed." The way he spoke with such confidence made me feel a bit like laughing. I waved my hand and had the eunuch drive him away. With a mind like his, if he hadn't been born from the Empress's womb, he would never have become the crown prince, even in death. But it's precisely someone like this who has the power to decide my life and death. In the corner, the little girl was sneaking a look. Clearly, she was from another palace. After she left, rumors began to spread in the palace, saying that I had seduced the crown prince first and then the emperor, branding me as a seductive enchantress who would bring disaster to the country. Li also found out, but he said nothing. The next day, a sudden fire broke out at the Bright Moon Nunnery, and dozens of nuns in the temple perished. The Bright Moon Nunnery is a royal temple. Yet it was openly burned down without the emperor showing any concern. The answer is already quite clear. Countless people in the court and the imperial harem gritted their teeth in frustration, yet they had no choice but to endure Li Yi's favor towards me. At that very moment, chaos erupted on the frontier. Taking advantage of our army's shortage of provisions during the winter, the Turks launched a surprise attack overnight and seized 3 of our cities. Coinciding with this, heavy snowstorms struck the southern regions, causing countless commoners to freeze to death and creating an urgent need for the court to allocate funds for disaster relief. In comparison, my trivial matters were quickly forgotten. After all, she was just a concubine in the harem, with no family background or connections, and wouldn't be able to stir up trouble for long. Li Yi became busy, staying in the imperial study until late at night every day. The empress took the opportunity to find me. As soon as I entered the Kuan Ning palace, the empress's head maid kicked me in the lower back. The pain making stars danced before my eyes. I got up and knelt down, as obedient as I had always been in the past. But the empress was far more ruthless. She hated me for corrupting her son and stealing her man. She lifted the teacup, took a slow sip, and then said, "Noble Lady Yun has offended her superior and defied me. Guards, bring the poisoned wine." The palace maids rushed forward. But I pushed them all away. "Your Majesty, you cannot sentence me to death." Hearing this, the empress looked at me directly for the first time. "Shiyuna, do you think that with the destruction of the Moonlight Nunnery, no one knows about the things you've done? You drugged the groom at 12 and fled to the nunnery. At 15, you were humiliated by Jingxian and nearly lost your purity. At 17, as a nun, you seduced the crown prince, after being discovered by the crown princess. You then went on to seduce the emperor. Tell me, if I were to reveal all these things to His Majesty, do you think you could still remain in his favor?" If he knew that the woman he holds dear in his heart is a cheap, promiscuous wretch, would he skin you alive or break your bones? The entire palace was filled with mocking laughter, with no one caring whether I lived or died. I stiffened my neck, a chill creeping up my spine. Closing my eyes, I said with a trembling voice, "Since your Highness has investigated all this, how could you not know that it was not my true intention? If I could live a decent life, who would willingly rely on their looks to serve others?" The kick I just received made my stomach hurt terribly. Holding back tears, I begged the Empress, "Your Majesty, my stomach hurts so much. I've been feeling restless these past few days, sometimes nauseous. I'm afraid I might already be carrying the royal air. Please, I beg your Majesty. For the sake of the child, could you call a physician? I'm in so much pain." As I spoke, I felt a warm flow slowly trickling down my thigh. The Empress also saw it but didn't take it seriously. Oh, a lowly creature still wants to give birth to another lowly creature. Dream on. Someone, force her to drink the poisoned wine. If the Emperor asks later, just say she drank it willingly. No, I took half a step back, only to have my arms pinned down by several matrons, who grabbed my hair and forced my head up. Just as the poisoned wine was almost brought to my lips, a tremendous force struck. Several maidservants were sent flying, crashing into the wall. Li Yi, his face ashen, stormed into the palace with his guards and scooped me up in his arms. I truly never imagined that the Empress would be so bold as to openly attempt to harm the imperial heir. Guards, confiscate the Empress's gold and silver, confine her to the cunning palace, and forbid her from leaving without an imperial decree. This is effectively house arrest. The Empress was so frightened that she could barely stand. She was terrified by Li Yi's decisive and ruthless action, not even bothering to ask a single question. Watching Li Yi hurriedly carry me away, she staggered 2 steps, fell back into the seat, despairingly said, "We've been tricked." Li Yi's main purpose in bringing me back to the palace was to force the Empress to make a mistake. The Empress has been married to Li Yi for over 20 years, and her maternal family holds immense power, growing increasingly arrogant in recent years, especially after the Crown Prince's marriage to the right minister. They have secretly begun to connect with officials, control the court, and prepare for the Crown Prince's ascension to the throne. How clever Li Yi is, seeing through the Empress's restlessness at a glance. He originally received news that the Crown Prince was involved with a nun and wanted to verify the truth of the matter. Upon discovering that the Crown Prince had no sense of responsibility and even shifted the blame onto a woman to resolve the issue, he brought me into the palace to support me in opposing the Empress. I was tainted and had no background, so the Empress naturally did not take me seriously, and I stumbled lightly. Li Yi never expected that I was actually pregnant, back in the palace. He was very unhappy. "Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant? If I had known, I wouldn't have let you take such a risk." I nuzzled his palm like a kitten. I thought to myself, "I must accomplish this great task for your Majesty. The child is your Majesty's essence and blood, and will surely be protected by the true dragon, safe and sound." I never expected that old bastard to suddenly kick me, and right in the small of my back at that, but it's just as well, thanks to that kick. Li Yi has become even more tender and caring toward me. With the Empress under house arrest, some people can't sit still anymore. The first to come knocking was my father, 5 years apart, and he has climbed the ranks all the way to the position of right minister. Upon seeing me, his expression shifted slightly, with an uncontrollable chill in his eyes. "I never knew I had such a fine daughter. Truly, you have inherited your mother's lowly bloodline. These dirty tricks come so naturally to you." I retorted sarcastically, "I can't compare to you, father, who personally entered the game. Back in the day, my maternal grandfather's case had quite a bit of your involvement, didn't it? My maternal grandfather did embezzle, in the River Channel case." Hundreds of thousands of taels of silver ended up in the backyard. But he also gave the order that the profits would be distributed only after the project was completed, and the construction of the designated area must be done properly. It was my father who took on this case. It was my father who turned a deficit of 200,000 taels into a staggering embezzlement of 1,200,000 taels. The Yellow River's floodwaters breached the dikes, leaving tens of thousands of people displaced, with countless deaths from starvation and drowning. At this time, my father acted with righteousness, turning in the account books, and a massive embezzlement case involving 1.2 million taels of silver was pinned on my maternal grandfather. My grandfather, who had embezzled with a certain boldness, faced the emperor's merciless decree of immediate execution with a clear mind. If the ruler demands the death of a subject, there is no way to delay it past the third watch. Everything is the will of the emperor. Yet my father climbed his way up by stepping on the bones of my maternal grandfather's entire family, rising to the position of right minister in just 5 years, truly shameless to the extreme. I don't want him to live a carefree life. After my father left, the court grew increasingly chaotic. Every day, I heard the ministers arguing. Li Yi pondered for a long time, relented, and decided to let the third prince lead troops to the front line to fight against the Turks, while also preparing to send the sixth prince south to assist the disaster victims. Anyone with clear eyes could see that this was an attempt to weaken the crown prince's power. At that moment, the crown prince rebelled. He joined forces with his father-in-law and 3,000 soldiers outside the city, attempting to force Li Yi to abdicate. The crown prince rebelled, and the third and sixth princes followed suit. In an instant, the inner city was ablaze with fire. The chaos comparable to the Xuanwu Gate incident. Li Yi lay in my bedchamber, listening to the clashing of swords outside, his expression somewhat desolate. He sighed. I never expected that my sons would all be in such a hurry to claim this throne. Decades ago, the Li dynasty had experienced a great upheaval, and it was only through Li Yi's political maneuvering and strategic marriages that he managed to win back the support of the powerful aristocratic families. So each and every one of them has ambition, and each and every one of them hopes for Li Yi's death. Li Yi, with disheveled hair and wearing his sleeping robe, lay in my arms, allowing me to stroke his temples over and over. Am I a failure? I'm only 43, and they're already scheming for my throne. He looked utterly exhausted. I took his hand and placed it on my slightly rounded belly. Your Majesty is far from a failure. Look, this is all your great achievement. Li Yi chuckled softly, his hand slipping down from my collar. It's a bit too big, needs a bit more time to grow. I tugged at the hem of my clothes, letting the fabric hang even lower, and was satisfied to hear Li Yi's breathing grow heavier once more. Your Majesty, don't lose heart. I'm counting on you to live a long life so I can ride on your coattails. You brought me out of the temple, promising to be my support. Now that I'm finally with child, I'm at my most vulnerable. Your Majesty, pull yourself together. Later, when my child is grown, I'll teach them to ride horses and hunt. Li Yi's heart softened at my words, and he sighed. Yuna, you really know how to sweet talk now. He had no idea that what I said was true. I've had a bunch of bad habits since I was a kid. The years I spent suffering at the Moonlight Nunnery are truly unforgettable, and I never want to go back to that kind of life again. So I clung tightly to Li Yi's coattails. When he schemed to pit the princes against each other, I helped fan the flames. When he needed someone to divert attention in the harem, I stepped up and took the lead. My efforts paid off. The crown prince and several other princes' rebellions all failed, and they were all placed under house arrest. The empress and several imperial consorts were sent to the cold palace. For a time, I became the most sought-after woman in the harem, but that didn't mean Li Yi was particularly indulgent toward me. He liked my youthful body, but he wouldn't hand over the authority of the harem to me. A few months later, Li Yi married the granddaughter of the general of the western garrison as his empress and took 2 daughters of loyal ministers as concubines. Thus, all the women who had been brought in during the earlier struggles for power were thoroughly cleared out, and imperial authority was completely consolidated in Li Yi's hands. The following autumn, I gave birth to the 13th prince, whom Li Yi adored, personally naming him Li Luo. I grew out my hair, becoming just like the other women in the imperial harem. The harem was peaceful and harmonious, with the new sisters getting along well, and Li Yi began visiting the younger sisters more often. Some of the old-timers who survived whispered mockingly, saying that my future would surely be no better. What they didn't understand was that from the moment Li Luo was born, I had secured a lifetime meal ticket. I didn't care about a man's affection, or even how many men there were, as long as he could provide me with a life of luxury. When Li Luo was 12, Li Yi granted him a distant fief. On one hand, it was to cut off any thoughts of competing for the throne. On the other, he was growing old and starting to care about his reputation for the centuries to come. My very existence, when considered, is a blemish to him, coupled with the fact that my looks are no longer what they used to be. Although Li Yi occasionally stays over for a few nights, his heart is ultimately elsewhere. I never make a fuss. I simply wash his hands and prepare soup for him, and after he finishes eating, I send him off to the other sisters. Li Yi feels increasingly guilty, sending piles of jewelry in abundance to my palace. He often sighs and tells me that as he gets older, he feels his strength waning. It's only when he's around young people that he feels truly alive. I smoothly flatter him. May your Majesty live for 10,000 years. Treasures are what I love most. Without having to serve a man, I can admire coral half a person tall, and pearls as big as fists. There's also fine clothing and delicious food, baths in milk, and a whole crowd of palace maids and eunuchs attending to me alone. Life couldn't be more comfortable. Sometimes, when Li Luo comes to see me and finds me lying on the chaise lounge with a face mask on, he can't help but laugh and cry, "Mother consort. You really have no sense of reason. You sleep in every day yourself, yet you urge me to get up early to study." I gave him a sideways glance. "What do you know? You're only 12, the age to study hard. The people in your fief are counting on you to lead them to a better life, so you can't slack off. It's different for me. I'm old, and my husband is capable. I should be enjoying life. Besides, I went through all that trouble to climb out of the temple just to live a good life." When Li Luo was 15, he was to leave for his fief. I also volunteered to go along. Li Yi, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, remained silent for quite a while. He had already aged, with white hair at his temples. At night, he entered my room and, just like before, nestled in my arms. "Yunyang, you too are going to leave me," I comforted him. "Your Majesty, you no longer need me." He fell silent for a long time before letting out a sigh. "You really are too understanding. I don't know whether to praise you for being clever or scold you for being heartless. Li Yi is well aware that I am merely using him, but what the emperor fears least is a woman coveting his wealth. I never make demands of him beyond money, nor do I seek benefits for my children. Even the fiefdom I received was a place other princes had rejected. Li Luo takes after me, showing little interest in power and remaining overly moderate among the princes. It is precisely because of this that we have managed to escape one internal conflict after another and gained the privilege of leaving the palace. On the day I left the palace, Li Yi did not come to see me off. He only gave me a box and told me to open it after his death, holding the wooden box. I looked at the man who had changed my fate, my eyes growing warm. I threw myself into his arms, unable to hold back any longer, and burst into loud sobs. Li Yi kissed my lips and whispered, "I am old now, and there is little I can give you. I have neglected you all these years. In the future, forget about me." I sobbed, Your Majesty is not old. I love your majesty the most, little fox. At this point, don't try to fool me anymore, alright? Take your treasures and go to where you belong. From now on, you are truly free." He turned and left without looking back. I cried silently for a while, then had the carriage turn around and head elsewhere. It's been a long time since we last met. I must go see my family. My father was executed after the turmoil that year. Only Shi Mingzhu, with her maid, and Li Ku remain, living deep within the courtyard of the old crown prince's residence, holding the token. I walked through the corridor and pushed open the courtyard gate. I just realized that Shi Mingzhu had long since changed. She had already gone mad, with disheveled hair, covered in filth, sitting on the ground picking up ants to eat. Li Ku had become terribly thin, hunched over as he chopped firewood. Although Li Yi had spared their lives over the years, life had not been easy for them. Seeing me, Shi Mingzhu showed no reaction, but Li Ku trembled slightly. He walked over in a daze. "Are you? Yunyang, it was me. You, where are you going?" Li Ku glanced at me a few times, then looked at Li Luo behind me. "Oh, heading to your fiefdom, I suppose." I nodded and gestured toward Shi Mingzhu with my chin. How could this be? Alas, the death of her in-laws hit her too hard, and she couldn't bear it, so she went mad. It's better to be mad. No need to endure disdain and live a life of humiliation. I smiled faintly. What's wrong with living in humiliation? Haven't I survived this way all along? Li Ku glanced at me and smiled. That's true. After being confined for so many years, he finally understands the hardship I went through back then. I'm just locked up here, still having food and clothing. You had to wash clothes and cook in the temple, which must have been even harder. I'm sorry I didn't save you from that suffering back then. His honesty made my petty desire to show off seem rather shameful. I awkwardly touched my nose. Forget it. It's all in the past. Besides, you've already faced the consequences. I didn't say that out loud. I had Li Luo leave some food for the crown prince before turning to leave. A few years later, Li Yi passed away. Not long after, the former crown prince and his consort also took their own lives. Li Yi passed the throne to the child of the new queen, who then ruled from behind the curtain, assisting the emperor in handling state affairs. It is said that on his deathbed, he repeatedly urged the queen to treat the other feudal lords with fiefdoms well. I grieved for over a month, dreaming every night that he kicked open the temple door and rescued me from the sea of flames. In such a short time, I lost several pounds. Li Luo grew somewhat anxious, and suddenly remembered the box Li Yi had left behind. He hurriedly brought it over and presented it to me. "Mother, please look at the memento father left for you. He hoped you would live well." Only when I opened it did I realize that it contained a letter of divorce that Li Yi had written long ago. He had only waited for his death to grant me freedom, allowing me to remarry as I wished. What virtue or ability do I possess, that even the Son of Heaven would consider such matters for me? My heart is filled with mixed emotions, both pain and joy. Li Yi, if there is a next life, I will still follow you. I began to eat and sleep properly, striving to take good care of my health. When I get better, there are still many handsome young men waiting for me ahead. After hearing the first story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, there is another similar story. Let's continue to see. Jane Suifeng and I saved a time-traveling woman. She revealed that we are the male and female leads in a book, destined to become an emperor and empress for the ages. She also said we have the protagonist's halo, so we can't die no matter what. Later, the little maid that Jen Suifeng had raised was captured by the enemy forces, and that very night, he sent me to the enemy camp in exchange for the maid. After all, you're the female lead, you won't die, as he said. I indeed returned safe and sound. He was overjoyed. What the time-traveling woman said is indeed true. Ah has committed a capital crime in the capital. You must hurry back to take the blame for her. I laughed and said, All right. He didn't know that the time-traveling woman had also given me one more piece of information. This is a story about a female emperor, where I am the emperor, and he is the empress. How can I become the emperor if I don't return to the capital? My hands and feet were bound. Several shiddy soldiers leered as they unfastened their trousers and approached me. Jen Suifeng had personally tied the knots, leaving me no chance of escape. The great Jin and Shidi had been at war for over 20 years. Their enmity long since solidified into a blood feud. He was well aware of the fate that awaited him if he fell into the hands of the Western DI. Originally, he was just an unfavored prince, sent by the emperor to the frontier. It was said to be for training, but in reality, it was to keep him away from the center of imperial power. Everyone knew that his chances of inheriting the throne were extremely slim. So when his little maid came all the way to Liangcheng to find him, he was moved to tears. But the two of them hadn't been together for long before they argued over some trivial matters, and the little maid ran outside the city in a fit of anger. If my master dislikes me, then I might as well go out and get myself killed. Falling into the hands of the Shidi isn't something you can simply die from if you wish. I pitied her. A young maid who was inexperienced in the world and unaware of the cruelty at the border. So I repeatedly tried to dissuade her and even assigned people to watch over her. But it's hard to guard against a thief for 1,000 days. And in the end, she found an opportunity to run away, only to be quickly captured by the Western DI. Jen Suifeng blamed himself so much that he banged his head on the ground, saying that Xiaoha's misfortune was all his fault and that he shouldn't have argued with her. So, while my father was out on patrol, he drugged me with a muscle-softening powder and handed me over to the Western DI in exchange for Xiaoha's return. He said, "Ah Zhao, Xiaoha ran out because of me. If something happens to her, I'll never be able to live with myself. After all, it's a human life. You are my fiancé, so you will definitely help me make it up to her, right? That woman who traveled through time said you are the female lead, so you definitely won't be in any danger. It's most appropriate for you to go and bring Xiaohe back. 3 months ago, while on patrol, we rescued a woman who claimed to be a time traveler. Her name is Fang Xia. She said that Jen Suifeng and I are the male and female leads in a storybook. We will raise an army, march back to the capital, and seize the throne. Under our rule, the great Jin will reach its peak, and we, as the eternal emperor and empress, will be revered for generations to come." At first, we thought she was just talking nonsense, but she went on to predict several events that were about to happen, and every single one of them came true without fail. Fang Xia said, "The first law of the storybook world, the protagonist never dies." Jen Suifeng lowered his head in deep thought upon hearing this, and it took me calling his name several times before he snapped out of it. It turns out that from that moment on, he had already begun scheming on how to use me. He said with deep affection, "Don't worry, if you come back alive, no matter what you become, I will marry you." I listened to him speak, feeling utterly powerless. Under the effects of the soft tendon powder, my tongue was immobilized, unable to utter a single word. Fang Xia only said I wouldn't die, but he never mentioned that I wouldn't suffer other harm. I wanted to beg him not to, but all that escaped was a single tear rolling down my cheek. He wiped the tears from the corner of my eye and comforted me, saying, "You're so kind-hearted, saving a life, you should be happy." Compared to a mere maid, General Cheng's legitimate daughter clearly held more value to the Western DI. Both sides were satisfied with this transaction. Only I was powerless to resist. I watched helplessly as Xiao He, crying and sniffling, threw herself into Jen Suifeng's arms. "Master, these people are so terrifying. I was almost scared to death." Woo-woo, Jen Suifeng's heart ached terribly. He wrapped her tightly in his cloak and then left with her without looking back. No one cared whether I lived or died. These Western DI soldiers would first subject their captives to severe torture. If the captives were women, Their fate was even more tragic. There were several women who went out to gather herbs and were captured. When I led troops to rescue them, they were covered in bruises, their lower bodies soaked in a mixture of red and white blood. Staring with cloudy eyes and showing no reaction, from then on, I ordered that no one was allowed to leave the city without permission. Those Western DI soldiers hadn't captured any people from the Great Jinn in a long time. It's this bitch. How many of our brothers has she killed? Today she's delivered herself right to us for some fun. That Great Jinn prince may be a fool, but damn, he's really loyal. I bit the tip of my tongue, and my body's consciousness gradually returned. Fingers touched the dagger hidden in the cuff. In the moment they closed in, I lunged at the nearest soldier. As they stumbled to the ground, I rolled and slit their throats with precision. Blood splattered across the ground. The tent flap was suddenly lifted again. Seeing the face of the newcomer, my heart sank. It was the eldest prince of the Western DI. We had clashed frequently at the border over the years, and I knew all too well that this man was ruthless and cunning. Extremely difficult to deal with. I was just thinking about how to deal with him. But he was the first to speak. I will send you back to the city tomorrow. This statement came out of nowhere, and I suspected he had some ulterior motive. He seemed to have anticipated this. As he took a letter from his sleeve and handed it to me, someone risked their life to make a deal with me, and now she wants to make a deal with you. I unfolded the letter with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. And the moment my eyes fell upon it, I froze. It was that time-traveling woman, Fang Xia. She revealed the weaknesses of the other Western DI princes to the eldest prince, urging him to return to Western DI immediately to seize power, which would temporarily halt the war between the two countries. In exchange, her condition was to let me go. She previously said that our world is a script, and that Jen Suifeng and I are the male and female leads of this world, destined to become an emperor and empress for the ages. After this incident, I had completely stopped believing her, because I will not marry Jen Suifeng, and the Cheng family will not help him raise an army to seize power. But she actually said this is a story about a female emperor. I am the emperor, and Jen Suifeng is my empress. She can help me secure the throne in advance, but after it's done, I must promise her one thing. I look outside the tent, without needing to think too much. All right. I promise. In her plan, I was to return to the capital first. Isn't it just a trip back to the capital? Since I have the protagonist's halo, I can even venture into the dragon's den and the tiger's lair. When I returned to the city, my father and Jen Suifeng were about to come to blows. When my father learned that I had been sent to the Western DI camp, he was so anxious that he immediately wanted to leave the city to rescue me. However, Jen Suifeng stopped him and refused to open the city gate. The reason given was that Xiaohe had been frightened outside the city and had not yet recovered, and opening the gate at this time would scare her. Without saying another word, my father lashed out with his whip. Jen Suifeng also got angry. Just as the two were about to come to blows, seeing me return safe and sound, Jen Suifeng immediately seized the moral high ground. He accused my father of being unreasonable, and my father was momentarily stunned. Jen Suifeng stepped forward and said to me with relief, "I told you that you would surely overcome this misfortune. See, you're fine after all." Xiaohe followed behind him and immediately covered her mouth upon hearing this. "Master, how can you say such a thing?" She pretended to look at me with heartache. General Cheng spent an entire night in the Western DI camp. Those Western DI men are all like beasts in heat. How could she possibly be unharmed? Tears welled up in her eyes, making her look pitiful and delicate. General Cheng was taken turns by them, and now she has to pretend nothing happened. She must be suffering terribly inside. How can you say she's fine? Are you even human? With that, she began to sob, her delicate pink fists pounding against Jen Suifeng's chest. She deliberately withheld the key information. Yet her words made everyone around her show a knowing expression. On the surface, it seemed like she was speaking up for me, but in reality, her words were meant to confirm that I had already been violated. Jen Suifeng seemed to suddenly realize something, his face showing an awkward look of pity. He reached out to touch my shoulder but stopped mid-air. Jiao, don't worry, am I, Jen Suifeng, the kind of vulgar and shallow person. Even if you are no longer a virgin, I said I would marry you. And I will keep my promise. Watching them perform in perfect harmony, I rolled my eyes. My Cheng family has guarded the border for the Great Jin for 3 generations, spanning decades, and holds high prestige among the people. I am the only legitimate daughter of the Cheng family. How could he marry me just because he wants to? At that moment, a city guard came to report that the imperial court had sent someone to capture the wanted criminal. Xiao He visibly panicked. She pulled Jen Suifeng aside and whispered a few words to him. Jen Suifeng frowned slightly, but soon showed a reassuring expression to put her at ease. He immediately walked up to me, held my shoulders with a gleam in his eyes, and whispered, "You've returned just in time." Xiao He attempted to assassinate the crown prince in the capital, and people from the capital have come to arrest her. If we hand her over, she will surely die. She went to assassinate the crown prince for my sake. I can't let anything happen to her. Go and tell them now that you were the mastermind behind the assassination, and then go back to the capital with them to confess. As soon as he finished speaking, he was punched to the ground. My father didn't wait for him to stand up, kicking him several more times. Although he spoke softly just now, my father was standing right beside me, and with his exceptional hearing, those words were truly too shameless, having been a military officer for decades. His ability to strike a person is beyond that of an ordinary man. Jen Suifeng coughed a few times and suddenly choked out a mouthful of blood. Xiao He screamed and quickly shouted, "How dare you, you old thing, how dare you strike the second prince? Guards, quickly drag him out and behead him, guards." She shouted at the top of her lungs, but none of the soldiers around her moved. My Cheng family has been in charge for 3 generations. Even if a prince were to die in Liangcheng today, not a single soldier would dare question the commander. She finally realized this and stopped shouting, quietly lying down beside Jen Suifeng, weeping softly. Only after my father had beaten him enough did I have someone pull him away. Jen Suifeng clutched his chest as he was helped up, his trembling finger pointing at my father in a fit of rage. I stepped forward, took hold of his finger, and whispered with a smile, "The second prince won't be angry, after all. You're the protagonist and won't die." He froze, looked at me, and his furious expression instantly shattered into pieces. He suddenly spat out another mouthful of blood. With so many people watching, he could only grit his teeth and say, "General Cheng was merely sparring with me. It's nothing serious." At that moment, several sword-bearing guards entered. Jen Suifeng pulled Xiao He behind him and shouted, "The fugitive you're here to arrest is Cheng Zhao. Take him and return to the capital immediately to report back." My father was about to speak, but I stopped him. Returning to the capital was exactly what I had in mind. It was like being handed a pillow just as I was about to fall asleep. But Jen Suifeng truly lives up to being the male lead, suffering such severe injuries, yet his complexion has improved so much in just a short while. If it were an ordinary person, my father's punch would have shattered their internal organs long ago. It seems there really is something like the protagonist's halo. He truly is not easy to kill. Before leaving, I reminded my father, the second prince is diligent and eager to learn, since His Majesty has sent him here to gain experience. Father, you must spar with him every day to live up to His Majesty's expectations. Although my mother always says he's just a martial artist, he's not really brainless. Seeing that I had a plan in mind, he nodded knowingly, as I passed by Xiao He. She gave me a triumphant smile and whispered in a voice only the two of us could hear, "From now on, I am the female lead. I held back my laughter. Then you just wait in Liangcheng. The people from the capital were no fools. They had always known exactly who they were after. But Zhen Suifeng was the second prince. And even though those below knew he was out of favor, they dared not confront him seriously. Plus, I personally confessed to my crimes. So they had no choice but to take me back to the capital. However, they didn't dare treat me like a real prisoner, only hoping that once we reached the capital, I could shield them from the blame for their incompetence. Therefore, along the way, they treated me with great courtesy. I also managed to learn about Xiaohe's situation from their conversations. She was originally Zhen Suifeng's personal maid. When Zhen Suifeng was exiled to the frontier by the emperor, he had intended to take her along. But she suddenly fell ill and thus remained in the capital. This girl, accustomed to a life of luxury by Zhen Suifeng's side, couldn't bear the slightest hardship. Now that she had lost her backer, the servants who had once treated her with respect no longer flattered her. She couldn't bear the injustice. So she turned her gaze back to the crown prince. Little did anyone know, the crown prince paid her no heed. So she took advantage of a palace night banquet to slip a drug into the crown prince's wine. Little did she know, she had been deceived by a charlatan selling fake medicine. It was not an aphrodisiac at all, but a deadly poison. Fortunately, the crown prince was blessed with good fortune and ultimately managed to survive. Xiao He knew that the matter would eventually be traced back to her. So she immediately packed her bags and fled to Liangcheng. She claimed that she had attempted to assassinate the crown prince for Zhen Suifeng, which genuinely moved him to the point of tears. Thus, Zhen Suifeng revealed to her that he was the male lead of this world. As a result, this little maid began to harbor thoughts of replacing me. It's just a pity that their plans are about to fall through. I have been stationed at the border with my father since I was young, and originally, I was not allowed to enter the capital without an imperial decree. I should thank them for creating this opportunity for me. Everyone knows I couldn't possibly be the murderer. Taking the blame for it would be a blatant act of deceiving the emperor. The emperor was already prepared to charge me with the crime of deceiving the sovereign. But as soon as I entered the Hanzhong Hall, I broke down in tears. Your Majesty, I have been wronged. I reported in detail how Zhen Suifeng had coerced me into taking the blame for the maid. The emperor's intelligence agency quickly confirmed that the news from the border city was indeed true. The emperor's face turned green with rage. Although he had initially sent Zhen Suifeng to the border partly because the crown prince was gaining power, he was also aware of Zhen's dalliances with maids in the mansion and intended for him to gain experience through hardship. He never expected him to be so utterly useless. The emperor immediately dispatched a trusted confidant to Liangcheng to arrest Zhen Suifeng and bring him back to the capital. And I took advantage of the night to go to the Eastern Palace. On the surface, the Crown Prince was the successful party in the political struggle, but in reality, he was well aware that the Emperor sending Zhen Suifeng to the border was not, as outsiders speculated, a sign of disregard for him. On the contrary, the Emperor had long been estranged from the Empress and had long been dissatisfied with the Crown Prince. Liangcheng has the powerful Cheng family army. With just a little thought, he would know that if Zhen Suifeng and the Cheng family joined forces, returning to the palace would be just around the corner. The emperor sent Zhen Suifeng to Liangcheng with the intention of having him win over my Cheng family, thereby strengthening his own power to counter the crown prince's influence. And indeed, when Zhen Suifeng first arrived in Liangcheng, that was exactly what he did. A noble prince, showing humility and respect in front of my father. My father was truly deceived by his outward appearance, thinking he would be a good son-in-law. Unfortunately, ever since I was 7 years old and orchestrated the great defeat of the Western DI, the one truly in charge of the Cheng family has always been me. I never had any feelings for him to begin with. until the appearance of the time-traveling woman. Fang Xie, he thought he had the male lead's script firmly in hand and had nothing to worry about, repeatedly offending me. How could I, Cheng Zhao, tolerate such disrespect? However, the crown prince was completely unaware of these matters. If the Cheng family supported the second prince, he would truly have the ability to compete with the crown prince. Although the crown prince now appears to be in a position of great glory, his status is actually precarious. Moreover, although the emperor feigned great anger this time and sent elite troops to capture Jian Suifeng, he would most likely be unharmed. The emperor will protect him, and since I have defied the emperor's wishes, he will not spare me either. From the moment I exposed Jian Suifeng in the Grand Hall, it was destined that I could only ally with the crown prince. The crown prince clearly realized this as well, anticipating that I would come to him, and thus had long prepared the sincerity for our secret alliance. I had not been seated for a quarter of an hour when a clamor arose outside the Eastern Palace. The palace doors were flung open with a crash, and the entire Eastern Palace was tightly surrounded by the Imperial Guards. The commander of the Imperial Guards shouted from outside, "The Crown Prince has privately colluded with military officials, by His Majesty's order. I am here to arrest the Crown Prince and escort him to the Imperial prison for trial." As soon as he finished speaking, an arrow was shot from among the Eastern Palace's death warriors toward the Imperial Guards. No one knew who had fired it. The entire scene instantly descended into chaos. In an instant, the trembling of bowstrings echoed one after another, and a dense rain of arrows poured down. Several guards, shielding the Crown Prince in front, were pierced through the chest by a sword. The Crown Prince snapped out of his panic and immediately realized that the Emperor was targeting him. If he were to enter the Imperial prison, he would have no chance to speak. He quickly analyzed the situation. Take the secret passage. Once you're out, immediately summon the Cheng family army for reinforcements. There was only one path left now, to rebel. The Death Soldiers immediately opened the secret passage. The Crown Prince was the first to dive in, signaling for me to follow. Amidst the dense rain of arrows, I neither dodged nor evaded, yet the arrows seemed to have eyes of their own, always missing me. Interesting. I reached out and caught a flying arrow, then shot it from behind, piercing straight through the Crown Prince's chest. He slowly turned his head, glaring at me as he demanded, You set me up." I raised an eyebrow. Isn't that obvious? Otherwise, why would the Crown Prince's assassins suddenly shoot arrows at the Imperial Guards? Upon hearing that the Crown Prince had died under a hail of arrows from the Imperial Guards, the Emperor suffered a heart attack and fell gravely ill. I was then imprisoned in the Imperial dungeon to await trial. The Emperor was seriously ill, and after waiting for a month without being summoned for questioning, I had no choice but to enjoy good food and drink while waiting in the dungeon. One day, as I was gnawing on a duck head, the guard outside was suddenly struck and thrown to the ground right in front of me. The person who arrived saw the duck head in my hand and showed an expression that was both amused and exasperated. "You're eating quite well. It seems there's no rush to rescue you." I tossed the duck head aside and wiped my hands. "Fang Xie is here, which means my father is almost ready to march into the capital. In fact, he started raising troops the very day I left, to give him a justifiable reason." I pretended to be coerced by Jian Suifeng to go to the capital to take the blame for his maid. Upon arriving in the capital, I intended to seek justice from the emperor, but instead, I was wrongfully imprisoned. As a general who has shed blood for the country, enduring such a great injustice, even if I could bear it, my father could not, and the soldiers who follow the Cheng family could not tolerate it either. Coincidentally, the eldest prince of the Western Di had also returned to his country to engage in a power struggle. With the border now stable, it was the perfect opportunity to raise an army. Fang Xie said that in the book, it took us a full year from raising the army to entering the capital. but with her presence, it now only took a month. She knew the details of every battle we fought and the weaknesses of every enemy. Even the border intelligence sent to the imperial court was intercepted by her and her people. The emperor hadn't even reacted yet, and my father's cavalry was already about to attack the capital. "Where is Jen Suifeng?" I asked. She shrugged. "To make use of his identity, I originally brought him along, but the maid by his side complained that following the army was too hard, so he took her sightseeing instead." According to Fang Xie, there was a tough nut to crack along the way, Xiao Boqi, the military governor of Longyu. "This man, like my father, is a fierce warrior. If we attack head-on, it will definitely be a tough battle, and we will suffer heavy losses. But Fang Xie knows his weakness. He is the former lover of Jen Suifeng's mother, Consort Liang, and for her sake, he has remained unmarried even past the age of 40. After the death of Consort Liang, he never forgot her, and naturally held Jen Suifeng in the highest regard. Therefore, when Fang Xie used Jen Suifeng to deceive him into pledging allegiance, he still believed he was raising an army for Jen Suifeng's sake. So, this person is the greatest obstacle to your future ascension to the throne. Keeping Jen Suifeng for now is also to restrain him. Oh, by the way, Jen Suifeng asked us to arrange the coronation ceremony first after capturing the capital, and then send someone to welcome him. Speaking of this, she couldn't help but laugh out loud. In that case, let's just do as he wishes. Before leaving, Fang Xie looked at the jailer in the cell and asked, "Is this your man?" It's no wonder she thought that way. My treatment in the imperial prison was indeed better than that of a distinguished guest. However, they're Jen Suifeng's people. Kill them. As soon as I finished speaking, the elite soldiers of the Cheng family army who had come with Fang Xie raised their swords and struck. The screams that echoed through the prison didn't last long. Although Jen Suifeng lost his mother at a young age, she still left him some connections. Perhaps this is what Fang Xie meant by the protagonist's halo. Although these people are being used by me for now, they will eventually realize they've been deceived. When that time comes, they will become my enemies. Towards enemies, one must never show mercy. Fang Xie entered through the secret passage from the Eastern Palace, before entering the prison. My purpose in going to the Eastern Palace was not only to kill the Crown Prince but also to find in advance the secret passage that Fang Xie mentioned, which would determine my ultimate victory. While I was dealing with the Imperial Guards, my people had already left the city through the secret passage. Fang Xie said that in the book, this was originally the escape route the Crown